I'd like to call the Committee on Housing to order. Today is Thursday, February 10th, 2022. It's 10:02 a.m. We're meeting via video conference, and some of us are in conference room 423 at the State Capitol. Good morning, everyone. We have, before we get started, I just wanted to say that we are allowing testifiers to speak up to 3 minutes. And if there's any technical problems that you have, we will try to make accommodations. Either if we will take you out of order if you have technical problems, and then come back to you when you're able to fully testify. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is HB 1748, authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds for affordable housing. These are funds that would be deposited into the rental housing revolving fund for families under 60% AMI. So let's start off with the first testifier. We have Denise Iseri Matsubara from Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation.
Aloha, good morning, Chair Nakamura, Vice Chair Hashimoto, members of the committee. HHFDC stands on its written testimony in strong support for this measure. The demand for this important resource continually exceeds the supply. Rental housing revolving funds are currently oversubscribed by at least 2.5 to 1. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify on this measure.
Thank you, Denise. Next up, we have Kevin Carney, EAH Housing, who submitted testimony in support. Betty Lou Larson, Catholic Charities Hawaii.
Aloha, Chair Nakamura and Vice Chair Hashimoto, members of the committee. Oops, I'm Betty Lou Larson with Catholic Charities Hawaii, and we strongly support this measure. We know that there's a desperate need for housing, and last year HHFDC could have created an additional 2,200 units, except they didn't have the funding and they could only award for 500, I think it was 512 units. So the developers are ready to go. They have good projects. We just need the money. We know also that the legislature is very concerned about the Alice population. And this is a struggling population also. We encourage the legislature to work with HHFDC to address the needs of those at 80% or up to 80% AMI with these fundings. HUD has changed its rules. It does now allow projects, low-income housing tax credits projects, which are linked with the rental housing revolving fund, to go up to 80% of AMI and income average. So that means more units could be produced at the low end, and then it would be balanced by some at the high end, which would address this other very struggling population. So we hope that this will really be a priority for your committee and the legislature this year to put more funds into this very important program. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty Lou. Next up, we have Laura Thielen, Partners in Care. In support. And we have late testimony from Kenna Storma Gibson from Hawaii Appleseed. In support. Is there anyone who I missed who would like to testify on this bill? Then if not, we will go. Oh, are there any questions, members? What? Oh, Bill Hicks. Would you like to testify?
Yes, Madam Chair, I appreciate that.
Okay, please identify yourself and the organization you represent, or if it's yourself.
Yes, my name is Bill Hicks. I live in Kailua. I'm chairman of the Kailua Neighborhood Board. However, I'm testifying as an individual.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm very strongly opposed to House Bill 2022.
Okay, we're not on that item yet. We're on HB 1748.
My apologies.
In about two more.
Mahalo.
Okay, all right. So do we have any questions on HB 1748? Seeing none, let's go to the next item, which is HB 1859. This is a bill which appropriates funds to the Hawaii Public Housing Authority for the state rent supplement program. First up, we have Scott Morishige, the Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. Scott Morishige, Governor's Coordinator on Homelessness and Chair of the Hawaii Interagency Council on Homelessness. I'll stand on my written testimony in support, provided that any appropriation does not adversely impact or replace priorities in the executive budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hakeem Wanzafi from the Hawaii Public Housing Authority.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. The Housing Authority stands in support of this impactful and cost-effective program in the homelessness prevention, as it does keep the participants housed and employed, and to bring to your attention that over 55% of the participant in the rent supplement are 62 years or older. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Craig Hurai from the Department of Budget and Finance. With comments, and we have Betty Lou Larson, Catholic Charities, Hawaii.
Good morning, Chair Nakamura and Vice Chair Hashimoto and committee members. I'm Betty Lou Larson with Catholic Charities Hawaii. We have worked for many years with the state rent supplement program and found it to be a very effective program. It really makes a difference for elderly and families, so they don't have that constant worry of where is the rent coming for the next month, and they can really focus on their health, their lives. Recently, Hawaii Perspectives 2019 did a large survey of voters, and amazingly, they found that the feelings of the voters is that their lives are not getting better. In fact, only 35% felt that their lives were better than 12 months ago, compared with 51% just a few years ago in 2015. So we feel this bill would really help to provide that supplement, and it will stabilize families, but it will also show voters that the state really is trying to find ways to help them with the cost of living, which is really what's bothering so many people here. Thank you so much for your help.
Sure. Thank you, Betty Lou. That's all we have on this item. Is there anyone who I missed who would like to testify? If not, well, let's open it up to questions, members. I have a question for Hawaii Public Housing Authority. Hakeem.
Aloha.
Good morning. So Budget and Finance said in their testimony that there's already 1.389 million budgeted in FY 2023 for the rent supplement program. And I just wanted to find out, does the $500,000 shortfall, is that included in this amount that's in the governor's budget?
Yes, the $500,000 is the shortfall that we will run into if we keep all the current participants. If you want to keep all the current participants, the $500,000 is needed in addition to the base.
And is it included in the 1.389 million?
No, it's the 1.3 million is the base.
That
The
is the base.
500 is not correct. The 500 is not included. This will be
Not.
in addition. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for the
you.
clarification.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, let's go on to the next item, which is HB 2022, which removes requirements for housing projects developed by the Hawaii Housing Finance Development Corporation to obtain approval from county legislative bodies, provided the project meets the appropriate zoning and plan designations. First up, we have Denise Iseri Matsubara from HHFDC.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. HHFDC supports the intent of this measure. 201H38 its whole purpose is to expedite affordable housing development, and we support that desire to streamline the process. However, conditioning the approval of 201H on zoning designations or plan designations may erode the efficacy of Section 201H38. In many cases, 201H38 is used specifically because the project doesn't meet the appropriate zoning plan or plan designation. So for a good example would be the Keawe Street Apartments in Maui, which didn't meet the county's zoning designation or plan designation and would have been disqualified under this bill. So there's some unintended consequences, I think, as written. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Next up, we have testimony in opposition from Tony Pedro. Okay, we have testimony from Kim Rogers in support. Susan Blanco DeQuet, opposition. Lee Hollingsworth Ramsey in opposition. We also have 5 additional letters of opposition from Carol Abe, Bruce Hultgren, Scott Noboritum, Janice Zane. I believe we have Bill Hicks on the line for this bill. Bill, go ahead.
Mahalo, Chair Nakamura. Again, I'm Bill Hicks, Chairman of the Kailua Neighborhood Board, but testifying as an individual. I'm very strongly opposed to House Bill 22, which reads in part, housing projects that shall be exempt from all statutes, ordinances, charter provisions, and rules of any government agency. I wonder why a bill like this is under consideration. What would prompt such extreme measures that exempt all normal rules? I think it is very rare that a Hawaii Housing Finance and Development Corporation project ever gets rejected by a county or city council. I don't know the numbers. I imagine the numbers might be 1 or 2. And when that happens, there was a housing project, an apartment complex proposed in Kailua 2 years ago in a residential area that ultimately was rejected by the Honolulu City Council. But it's important to understand the circumstances of that decision. I hope that decision isn't the basis for this bill, but if it is, it's really important to understand the circumstances of that particular case before removing any remaining check and balance. In the extremely rare case that a council should reject a project, there almost certainly would be some valid, extraordinary cause for rejecting it. The decision currently rests with elected members of the city or county council and not unelected commissioners or bureaucrats. And I really think that that's exactly where the buck should stop. Elected representatives should be able to consider input directly received from the community and factor that in while also weighing the prospective benefits of a project, especially in the very rare case where a large project is proposed to be on developed residential land. Properly zoned land exists for these projects, and such land should be used as intended. The rules are already heavily weighted to support any reasonable and responsible project, and even include an automatic approval provision after 45 days. Isn't that something that we can trust in that process? If residential land is chosen for such a project, it then becomes especially important that elected officials who in theory, and I think often in practice, hopefully, represent we the people are the ones responsible for weighing the pros and the cons in making such a decision. So I would ask that the committee reject this bill. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hicks. Is there anyone who I missed who would like to testify on this matter? If not, members, any questions? Okay, then let's go on to the next item on the agenda, which is HB 2080. This is a bill to authorize the transfer of excess monies from the rental housing revolving fund to the dwelling unit revolving fund. And the first up, we have this Denise Iseri Matsubara from HHFDC.
Thank you very much, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. HHFDC stands on its written testimony in strong support for this measure. As it stands right now, these tax exempt funds that have been sitting in the account for quite some time cannot be used to finance affordable rental housing projects under U.S. Treasury rules because there can only be one tax exempt financing source per project. In order to be used, it needs to be transferred to another account. In this case, this measure would authorize Budget and Finance to make that transfer to the DERF account where it can be utilized for infrastructure obligations, such as in the villages of Kapolei and Waihuli. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
And next up, we have Denise for DBEDT.
Standing on Director's written testimony and support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other anyone who would like to testify on this matter who I missed? Okay. Members, questions? See none. Let's go on to the next item. HB 2239. This is a bill to increase the minimum number of residential units in a condominium project that must be offered for sale to prospective owner occupants in the 30-day period following the initial date of sale of the condominium from 50% to 90%. First up, we have Evan Oe from NAIOP.
Aloha Chair Nakamura, Vice Chair Hashimoto, members of the committee. My name is Evan Oe on behalf of NAIOP Hawaii in opposition to the bill. As Chair stated, HB 2239 would increase the minimum number of residential units in a condominium project that must be offered for the sale of prospective unit owner occupants 30 days following the initial date of sale from 50 to 90%. Our primary concern with the increased percentage is the negative impact that it would have on sales for new projects. Potential buyers often have a tough time committing to an owner-occupant residence for a period of 2 to 3+ years due to their changing circumstances. Based on relevant sales data and the current 50% owner-occupant requirement in HRS 514B-95.54 has proven to be aligned with historical residential demand. Rarely does the immediate demand exceed the current 50% offering based on the composition of the market and legal obligations for purchasers to occupy the unit for 1 year after closing. Typically, there is not enough owner-occupant demand to justify the 90% requirement in all condominium projects. Although the delay is only 30 days, the early stages of our product launch are critical to the sales momentum. If slow sales occur during this period, it could result in further delays or even cancellation of projects, resulting in lower stock for new homes. For these reasons, we respectfully urge you to defer HB 2239. I'll be available for any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you, Evan. Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this bill? Seeing none. Members, questions? I have a question for Evan. What is the definition of owner occupancy?
So based on our reading, owner occupancy is that the owner has to reside in the unit for a minimum of a year after the sale. So we find that a lot of owners or potential buyers are very hesitant to be locked in because they have to, these projects are planned 2 to 3 years in advance and they have to get locked in and then they have to be in the unit for a year after that. So some are very hesitant to make that kind of commitment, which makes the 90% requirement relatively difficult to meet in those early stages.
And who enforces this 1 year occupancy?
I believe it's going to be the real estate commission, but that's a good question. I can follow up with you on that as well.
Thank you. And how do you, I think your point that I'm hearing is that it's difficult to, the 50% kind of reflects current residential demand for these owner occupant units. How do you measure residential demand?
Oh, so we measure residential demand based on the sales. So when we analyze it, I think projects typically are required to do 20%, and then we take the market percentages of how many of the local residents are we seeing coming in, and what our residents, or how many of them are going to be applying for the projects and everything.
So are you saying that you don't have, once these units go on the market for the 50% of the units, that there's no waiting list after that 1 month period? Is there?
Sorry, go ahead, Chair.
That there's no waiting list, which might be a reflection of market demand.
Right. So we find that there, the demand that comes in is the 50%, and there isn't really, I would necessarily say, a waiting list. We find that the result of the 50% is that owners are just hesitant to be locked into that 1 year. And so we feel that there's more demand out there, but they're just not going to be applying because of the hesitancy to be required for that 1 year.
Is that because they're hesitant because they really don't want to be an owner occupant? They want it to be an investor owned property?
We feel as though it's more due to the changing of circumstances. For example, if a family or an individual picks a 1 bedroom, but then they elect to have kids, it'll be hard for them to really transition out of that and need to expand into a larger unit if they're locked in for that 1 year. We find that might be something that's more the reason and justifications as to why they're not going to be owner occupants in their particular unit, or may have to change according to their circumstances.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, members? Yes, Vice Chair Hashimoto.
So Evan, I think what would be really helpful is to kind of get an understanding of how you're measuring that market demand. I think if there's any projects that you recently have seen, that would show us where, that I think if meeting that 50% was easier, was hard, I think we would want to see that in real numbers to see, okay, is the market really meeting the demand at 50% in the last couple of, because this is just for condos, I would imagine if it's coming onto market, there might be a difference between maybe a high-end condo, right? That where if it's over $1.5 million, that market might meet demand at 50%, but I would assume 50%, $1.5 million and below, man, you're selling out real quick, right? So I think it would be helpful if we understood those nuances. If price point does make a difference in applying this. So I don't know if you have any thoughts in the meantime.
Right. So you make a great point. The price point does make a difference, and of course, there's going to be just more demand because there's going to be more available buyers at the lower amounts, or more affordable pricing for units. But I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I can't really give you a great example in terms of the projects and the percentages. But we can follow up with the committee and chair and vice chair and to provide if we can show an example of it that really shows what kind of demand is out there and that calculus.
Thank you, Chair.
I like where this discussion is leading, and maybe we need to do some additional follow-up work, and maybe think about targeting based on price points. Thank you. Thank you. Next, any other questions? Okay, so we're going to go to the last item on the agenda, which is HB 2395, authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds to be appropriated into and out of the rental housing revolving fund for redevelopment of the Department of Hawaiian Homeland's property located at 820 Eisenberg Street, Honolulu, Hawaii, for rental housing for Native Hawaiian beneficiaries. First up, we have William Ayla from the Department of Hawaiian Homeland.
Good morning and aloha, Chair Nakamura and Vice Chair Hashimoto. Thank you for hearing this bill. We strongly support this bill authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds to be used at our rental housing project at 820 Eisenberg. We'll be standing by for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ayla. Next up, we have Stanford Carr, Hale Mo'ili'ili LP. In support. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to testify on this matter? Okay, members, questions? Seeing none, we will recess for decision making. Reconvening the Committee on Housing. The first item, HB 1748, Chair is recommending approval with amendments. The first amendment is to add the provision that we are expending money out of the rental housing revolving fund. And then we also want to specify that the purpose of the appropriation is for projects under 201H-202E1. We want to keep the appropriation amount blanked out, defect the effective date to July 1, 2050. Members, are there any questions? Seeing none, let's take the vote, Vice Chair.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 1748 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Aquino.
Aye.
Representative Clark.
It's an aye.
It's an aye. Okay,
Can't
sorry,
hear.
can't hear you, Rep Clark. Rep Iligan.
Aye.
Rep Kitagawa.
Aye.
Rep Lepresti.
Aye.
Rep Takumi.
Aye.
Rep McDermott is excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. The next item, HB 1859, relating to the rent supplement program. Chair is recommending approval with amendments. We want to include technical non-substantive amendments for clarity, consistency, and style, blank the appropriation amount, and defect the date to July 1, 2050. Any questions or concerns? Vice Chair, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 1859 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Okay, members, HB 2022 is a bill relating to housing and HHFDC's powers. We are we note the concerns of the community. We note the concerns of HHFDC, and but we want to just keep the conversation going for now. We're gonna just move it along, and we want to approve with a defective date. Any questions or concerns? Okay, if not, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 2022 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. The next item is HB 2080, relating to state funds, transferring the rental housing revolving funds that cannot be used with tax credits to the dwelling unit revolving fund, so it can be used for infrastructure. Chairs would like to recommend approval with amendments. We would like to make technical, non-substantive amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Keep the appropriation amount blanked out and defect the date to July 1, 2050. Any questions? Okay, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 2080 with amendments. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? With all others voting aye, and noting the excuse of Representative McDermott, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. The next item, HB 2239, relating to condominiums, trying to encourage more owner occupancy units. We note the concerns, but we would like to keep the discussion going. We will follow up with some of those price points before it moves to the next committee, but we'd like to recommend approval and to defect the effective date to July 1, 2050. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's take the vote.
Recommendation of the chair is to pass HB 2020-2239 with amendments, noting the excuse of Representative McDermott. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no, without others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you very much. HB 2395, regarding the issuance of GEO bonds for the DHHL Eisenberg project. We would like to approve with amendments. We just note that not everyone on the DHHL waiting list can afford a single family home. So I believe this is a welcome initiative to allow families without the means to rent housing. So especially our Native Hawaiian kupuna. So I'm very, I would like to recommend approval with amendments. We would like to defect the date to June 1, 2050, and we would like to blank the appropriation amount. Members, questions? Comments? Okay, seeing none, let's take the vote.
Recommendations of the chair is pass HB 2395 with amendments noting excuse of Representative McDermott. Any other members voting with reservations? Any members voting no, without others voting aye, the recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. We have a joint hearing with Housing and Human Services at 11 a.m. This meeting is now adjourned.